She never planned to remember the day she met him, yet fate had a strange way of carving memories that felt too vivid to fade. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after weeks of emotional exhaustion, and she stood at her front door holding a list of renovations she barely cared about. Her house needed fresh paint, but her heart needed something much deeper, though she didn't dare admit it. When he walked up the porch steps with paintbrushes in hand and a calm, respectful gaze, she noticed only one thing: he looked like someone who understood silence. His clothes were simple, flecks of dried paint coloring them like stories from past lives. She hired him because he quoted an honest price, not knowing she was inviting someone into her home who would eventually repaint the dull corners of her soul with emotions she had long forgotten. The first day, he didn't talk much, and she appreciated that. He moved around the rooms gently, as if the walls were sacred, as if every crack carried a story he didn't want to interrupt. She watched from the hallway, sometimes holding a cup of tea, sometimes pretending to read. But she always ended up observing him, how he lifted the ladder, how he mixed colors with a quiet kind of precision, how he paused now and then to step back and make sure he was creating something better than before. She found herself breathing easier around him. Every brushstroke he made against the walls felt strangely comforting, as though he wasn't fixing just her house but smoothing over the fractures of something deeper. She didn't say it aloud, but she could feel it, a shift, slow and subtle, like a heart learning to trust again. He noticed things, little things no one else ever cared about. The uneven corner near the kitchen door that she always hated but never had the courage to fix. The faded patch on the living room wall that reminded her of a past she didn't want to revisit. Without asking, he fixed them all. When she asked why he went beyond what she hired him for, he simply smiled and said, "Some things need more care than people are willing to give themselves." The words touched something fragile inside her, something she had locked away for years. She walked into another room before her eyes could betray the emotions stirring unnecessarily, yet she knew he had already seen more than she wanted to reveal. As the days passed, the house began to change. Colors brightened, rooms felt warmer, corners held light instead of shadows. She realized she spent more time at home than usual, just to be around the peaceful presence he carried. They spoke more often, sometimes about nothing at all, sometimes about everything that mattered. He shared stories about how he started painting after losing someone dear, how colors had helped him heal, how walls became easier to fix than hearts. She listened quietly, feeling his pain blend with her own, forming an unexpected bridge between two people who had never planned to cross paths yet somehow fit into each other's unfinished chapters. One afternoon, rain poured heavily outside, and the soft drumming against the windows made the house feel like a sanctuary. He was working in the living room, humming softly to himself. She stood nearby, unable to explain why she didn't want the moment to end. When he turned and caught her staring, she blushed like someone remembering what affection felt like. He didn't tease. Instead, he offered a gentle smile, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. "You know," he said quietly, "a home reflects the person living in it. Yours is changing beautifully." She felt a warmth spread across her chest, a kind she didn't expect to feel again. She walked away before she could embarrass herself, but she carried his words like a soft ember glowing gently inside her. The next day, he brought flowers, not for her, he insisted, but for the front porch he thought needed a welcoming touch. Yet when he handed her the bouquet so she could choose where to place them, she felt something shift. She held the flowers close, inhaling their gentle fragrance as if it were a breath she had been waiting to take. She thanked him, her voice softer than usual, and he nodded like he understood something unspoken. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't try to step closer, he simply let the moment breathe. That was what she liked most about him, he never forced anything. He allowed her heart to move at the pace it had forgotten it deserved. He painted the kitchen that day, the room she once loved but abandoned after life became too heavy. She stood by the counter, telling him how she used to cook there, how she had dreams of filling the house with laughter and warmth. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, but she kept going. He listened fully, his eyes soft with understanding, not pity. When she fell silent, he said, "Maybe it's time to bring those dreams back." She didn't respond, but her gaze lingered on him longer than necessary. Something inside her loosened, like a knot slowly unraveling after years of being tightly wound. There was a moment, small but unforgettable, when their hands brushed accidentally while she passed him a cup of water. It was a simple touch, but her heart reacted as if it had been waiting ages for even the tiniest reminder of tenderness. She apologized quickly, embarrassed by the spark she felt. But he didn't pull away. "No need to apologize," he murmured softly, his voice carrying a warmth that settled into her bones. For the first time in years, she felt safe being seen. Not judged, not rushed, just quietly understood. As he painted her bedroom, she found herself opening up more, telling him stories she had buried, fears she never voiced, dreams she thought she outgrew. She didn't know why she trusted him so quickly, but something about him invited honesty. He spoke too, sharing parts of his own life with a raw simplicity that made her feel less alone. The conversations painted invisible colors onto the walls, shades of trust, healing, and companionship. Every day, the house grew brighter, and so did the space she held inside herself. One evening, he worked longer than usual, determined to finish the final coat before weekend. She brought him dinner, insisting he couldn't paint on an empty stomach. They sat on the floor, eating from simple plates, laughing softly at a smudge of paint on her cheek he playfully pointed out. The room glowed warmly in the soft lighting, and for the first time, she imagined what it would feel like to have someone sit beside her like this every day. When he looked at her with a gentle admiration he didn't bother hiding, her heart whispered a truth her mind wasn't ready to admit. The next morning, she stepped into her newly painted living room and felt something bloom in her chest. It wasn't just the color on the walls, it was the feeling they carried. Warmth, comfort, hope. He walked in behind her, wiping his hands on a cloth, and stood quietly as she took everything in. "Do you like it?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to find words. Her eyes shimmered with emotion she didn't try to hide. "It feels like a new beginning," she whispered. He didn't step closer, but his presence wrapped around her like a quiet embrace. It was on the final day of the project when she realized how deeply he had changed everything. Her house no longer felt lonely. The walls didn't echo sadness anymore. Instead, they carried traces of laughter, shared stories, and gentle moments that stitched themselves into memories. She found herself wishing the work wouldn't end. When he told her he had finished, she felt something inside her sink, but she hid the feeling behind a polite smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "You did more than I expected." He nodded, but his eyes held the same heaviness she felt. He began packing his brushes and tools, and she stood by the doorway, watching him the way people watch something important slip away too soon. She wanted to say something, ask him to stay longer, tell him he brought color back into her life, not just her home, but the words tangled in her chest. When he approached her to say goodbye, the air grew strangely heavy. He extended his hand in a professional gesture, but she didn't take it. Instead, she looked into his eyes and whispered, "You didn't just paint my house, you painted me back into myself." He froze, breath hitching slightly, as if her words struck deeper than she realized. He stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. Their silence spoke louder than any confession. "I didn't want to leave," he admitted in a quiet, vulnerable tone. "But I wasn't sure if you..." She cut him off gently, not with words but by placing her hand over his. A simple touch, but powerful enough to dissolve the distance between them. His fingers curled around hers, careful and warm. The moment didn't rush, it simply existed, soft, honest, and real. He didn't leave that day. Instead, they walked through every room together, admiring the colors one last time. Each room felt like a chapter they had written together. And when they finally stopped at the doorway, the evening sun painting gold across their faces, he whispered, "If you ever need someone to paint anything else, even if it's not a wall, I'm here." She smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes, not of sadness, but of finally being understood after years of silence. She hired him to paint her house. She never expected he would paint her life with love instead.